This ought to be instructive to anyone here that if you're pushing the envelope or doing things that may not feel right, let alone be right, you better be careful. I think he'll put 2 and 2 together. In this case, he was taken to the carpet, and it's because
you think he has regret with what he did.
I think he'll be instructed by what has occurred here, and certainly any individual would want to avoid whatever might need to be modified to go through this again.
Republican Senator Mike Braun there telling NBC's Chuck Todd today that he hopes the impeachment process will be instructive to President Trump. This as the president's defense team prepares to resume its arguments in the Senate trial tomorrow. Joining me now, Danielle Moodie Mills, host of WokeAF Daily at DNR Studios, and Michelle Bernard, president of the Bernard Center for Women, Politics, and Public Policy, and a columnist with U.S. News and World Report. Ladies, good to see you both. Thanks for joining me. Danielle, your reaction first up to Senator Braun's perspective there, and just how many people do you think honestly share that view?
I think he may be the only person that has that view. I don't think that the president is going to learn anything. I mean, right now he's been on a tweet storm since this morning. He's been threatening Adam Schiff, which is his mode of operandum. Anytime that he feels like he's backed against the corner, he starts threatening people. So I don't know what he's learning from this process, nor do I know what Republicans are really learning from this process, being as how many of them in the room are either reading books or doodling. This is something that is so incredibly important to our country right now, to their jobs, and they just don't seem to be up to the task at all.
But you know, the mere prospect of Mike Braun having to basically say the president needs to be schooled here. He's got to learn something from this process. What does that say to you, Danielle?
I mean, it says to me that the president doesn't know anything about our Constitution. And yes, he should be schooled. And yes, he should be a curious student of history, but he is not. He's a vindictive, very small man who is not learning anything except how to go after his opponents continually on Twitter. That's what he's learning in this moment, is whether or not people are on his side or they're not putting the country first at all.
Well, we have Trump's lawyers who are going to be making their case to the Senate tomorrow after giving 2 hours of opening arguments on Saturday. I want you all to listen to the reaction some Republican senators gave while leaving yesterday's session. Here it is.
What we heard today was very concise. It was full of truths and facts as presented from the House manager's own witnesses.
What we saw today in just 2 short hours is what the House left out in 21 hours, all in the effort to undermine and impeach and remove this president and to undermine the election of 2020.
It's pretty clear to me that the transcript was selectively utilized by the House.
Do you think, Michelle, that Republicans have already heard what they need to hear them, convince them to stand by the president? I mean, what do you think the chances are? Something could happen in the next few days that could sway GOP senators. Is there something that comes to mind, something you might expect?
No, there's absolutely nothing, I believe, that can be said at this point in time that will sway GOP senators to remove the president from office. The case that was presented by the Democrats over 20-odd hours over the last week was one of the best that I have ever seen presented by any lawyer or non-lawyer, over the last 30 years. The closing statements made by the managers, all of the evidence, all of the testimony that we heard was absolutely dead on. And at that point in time, if the best that the president's defense team could come up with was what we saw in yesterday's 2-hour preview, there's nothing that will change their minds. At this point in time, what we seem to see from Senator Mitchell as well as his Republican colleagues is that winning and keeping this president in office is more important than the Constitution. It is more important than the nation. It is more important than any of the things that we teach other pro-democracy nations about the importance of democracy and the importance of morals in domestic and foreign policy is less important than putting this president out of office.
So then, Danielle, how do you see the rest of this week playing out?
I mean, I think it's going to be tough to watch. It's hard to watch people lie through their teeth every single day for hours on end. I think it's going to be incredibly difficult. But to Michelle's point, they have nothing to offer. They're not refuting the facts. They're blaming process and they're calling names. It's probably one of the most immature, half-baked defenses that we've ever seen. I'm sure that a high school, debate team could do better than what the Trump team is doing. Because what Adam Schiff and the other House managers put together was so brilliantly done, and history will remember their patriotism.
Yeah. How do you interpret the tweet, Michelle, that the president put out there on Adam Schiff? I mean, Adam Schiff has said that he interpreted it as a direct threat.
Well, absolutely, it's a direct threat, and we don't see any reason not to believe it's not a direct threat, because that is the way that this president works, right? So, with regard to Schiff, with regard to Maria Yovanovitch, with regard to anyone who is an opponent of the president, you can't help but see it as a direct threat. Over and over and over again, it's the way the president operates, and I suspect that later this week we'll either see more. We'll see actually a combination of more threats from the president, as well as more red herrings, like what we saw with Jay Sekulow yesterday, saying, Russia, the Mueller report, the Mueller report. All of that was for a Fox News audience and for the president to give him more fire to threaten people like Adam Schiff.
Danielle Moodie Mills and Michelle Bernard. Ladies, thanks so much for wrapping up this hour. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Calling for an apology, why a veterans group wants an explanation from the president over comments he made about wounded U.S. troops.